Well, we did it again for the third time in our show's history. We did run a little bit long, so we're going to break this next episode over 2 episodes. So, for now, enjoy part 1 of our talk with Magalie René. Welcome to the HIT podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I am your super excited host, Toby Kennedy, because not only do we have an amazing guest, this is episode 50. We're tuning in every week, watching the numbers go up, watching you guys support us, and we are so very thankful. Every week, what we hope to do is curate awesome speakers, great content, be a worthy follow for you. You trade us 15-ish minutes a week of your time, and I hope that we're bringing you relevant stuff going on in the space. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions, and without any further ado, special guest Magalie René. Magalie, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so grateful to have you on, and just to give the audience a little bit of background, first of all, we've known each other for a little bit of time, but
Absolutely.
Second of all, recently you came in and did an in-person seminar here at our office that was of all of the, I honestly almost want to say hundreds, but however many seminars we've done, was one of the most well-reviewed.
Oh, that's
the
wonderful.
content, the audience after was amazing. And I was like, hey, I know that we normally do this long form. Can we get this bite-sized? And you very graciously agreed. And I cannot think of a better 50th episode. So thank you.
Absolutely. I received that, and I'm thrilled to be here. I love a good compliment.
You're the best. You're the best. Maybe to give the audience a little bit of kind of background, the sort of high-level overview on how you find yourself in the chair today. Maybe give me a little bit of your professional beats.
Yeah, it's so powerful to think about that question, because it's never an easy answer, because my background and my professional background in particular is nonlinear.
Yeah.
So I certainly went to school and finished, undergrad in communications, but it took me in so many different ways. My background is in PR, so I've done public relations, and I've also done, for 6 months, I was a fashion stylist.
Yeah.
And this is for people who have a lot of different interests, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to take you somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
So I did interior design for inner city schools, which is really that was a real passion of mine. Yeah. But ultimately, I don't know, somehow I found myself really connecting the dots between communications and leadership development.
Yep.
I started doing my own personal development, and I fell in love with coaching. I fell in love with the idea of impacting people and teaching them not to be, a-holes at work. Are going to be really PC about that. But, teaching people how to be effective, connect with others, inspire them, as well as get the job done.
Yeah.
And that is a fine line, and that's really where the crux of my work is. And I believe the future of work is compassionate, and that's our philosophy, and that's what we do at Workplace Catalyst.
That's awesome. And it's so, that's fascinating. Like that takes me in so many different directions. I want to start, and maybe just to kind of dive right in. When you say teach people not to be a-holes, right? Teach people sort of not to be a bigger jerk than they need to be. What does that look like in practice? Like, what is that really, how do you encounter that?
It's very interesting. So what is it? I think we all know what it's like to have the difficult, challenging supervisor, colleague, team member. We know what that's like, and we know the challenges of that. But I find that there is a through line. I think other than, a small percentage of people in the world, most people are not actively malignant, narcissistic, negative, evil people.
Yeah.
Even if they're doing things that are not effective, and maybe they're not likable, or they're quote unquote difficult, it's not a purposeful thing. It's more a response to something deeper. And usually that deeper thing is where we all could use some support. So where do we get to kind of step back, take a breath, and stop being consistently triggered by all of the things? And I think it's that trigger point that has us react and respond in ways that protect ourselves. We know CYA, right, in the workplace. We do a lot of things that are not really effective from a leadership perspective. They just keep us safe.
Yeah.
Right. And they keep us maybe on top of our little tiny domain.
Right.
But what we're trying to do, especially with this audience, right, with you all who are watching, you're leaders. And I always say everyone is a leader. It doesn't matter where they are in the organization, but especially this audience. you're all leaders, and so the opportunity is there to really get clear on your own self-mastery, meaning like stepping back from the things that trigger you so you can think really effectively and wisely about how you communicate with people, especially people that are different than you.
And I want to get into that, but what I think I'm hearing you say, if I can almost put words in your mouth, is the relationship between some self-awareness and your efficacy as a leader.
Absolutely. There's a direct line. I do my best to kind of debunk it and to speak in layman's terms, because we all hear terms like self-awareness and self-mastery, and like, what does that even mean? So yeah, I think but it's, you put it perfectly, and those 2 points really come together.
Yeah. And then you had just touched upon like not only that point in and of itself, so some self-awareness of myself, how I can be a better leader, but then folding in the differences between us in our own workplace and maybe touching upon how that's a bit of an expertise of yours.
Yeah, I think anytime you get into communicating effectively, anytime you're thinking about compassionate leadership or leadership development skills, some people call them like soft skills. I call them absolutely essential skills. You're not going to get very far if you can't get people on your side. And
I talk about it all the time, and I'm sorry to jump in.
No,
but
please, feel free.
I love punching the heck out of this point, because in my mind, even if you're doing it for coldly business reasons and you're just watching your bottom line all the way through to you're actually caring about being a good person, that the prescription's kind of the same. Like you can do this stuff because you should, but you can also do this stuff because it has impacts.
100%. And I think what's interesting is that even people who don't necessarily experience themselves as compassionate, and they're not really compassionate, the highest level of leadership expertise, people that are really powerful leaders, charismatic, they have this understanding. They get it. They know, even if I'm not feeling it, this is how I get to engage with people so they can be on board with my vision and where we're going.
Shake hands and kiss babies,
That's
man.
right. That's right. You got to shake hands and kiss babies. I love that. And wave to the audience.
Yeah. But like you're saying, because that can help you relate as a leader, right? If the listener, if the other can maybe hear my message as I'm intending it, and perhaps I can lower those walls with a little bit of relatability. Yeah,
I agree with that. I also want to bring in the very important point of, one, it's kind of like neutralizing your triggers, right? Which is the hardest part of it. But the other piece is to understand that every single person we're encountering, that they all have their own concerns, their own, there's so much assumption we make about people. When we look at them, we're already judging them just off of our safety. And we're making assumptions about people that fall into different demographics. If he's cisgender, right, which means straight white male, then he must be like this. If it's a black woman, they must be like this. I just used our demographics just to keep it copacetic.
That's right.
But we're making so many assumptions about each other. At the end of the day, we're just human beings. So how do we connect in a human way aside from all that?
I love that, because it brings me to another sort of philosophical thought that I often have to wrestle with, especially in leadership, which is remembering, and there's a lot of different ways people put it, but long story short, like everyone's kind of the main character of their own story, right? They're the hero of their own story. So you're seeing things through the eyes of the self in such a pronounced way that when you realize so's everybody in the room we're talking to right now, and that's all happening at the same time.
Yep. And I love to make the analogy of a pair of sunglasses that you put on.
Love it.
So where you come from, where you're born, who your parents were, where were they from, whether you like hot sauce or don't like spicy foods, or whether
you're some weirdo that doesn't like spicy food.
Could be. Oh, this is man after my own heart. So whoever you are, we come with so many perspectives and things that are uniquely our own, and we wear those like a pair of sunglasses, and we see everyone through that lens. So it really requires mastery of yourself to say, I know this is the case, let me put this down and just be.
Each experience, each moment of life adds a hue to that lens. And we've all gone through the different color hues, but you need to know that when I'm showing you a blank piece of paper with an objective color on it, the glasses you're wearing, the glasses I'm wearing, the different hues that we've experienced throughout, we will not see that precisely the same. And again, going back to an awareness of that, just so that you know, my objective truth is not necessarily an objective truth. It's the lens through which I see this.
Yep.
But other person might have a different lens, and we should talk about this to come to, again, even coldly business efficiency.
Yeah, and I love that you brought it back to there, because I was literally going to bring it home to the workplace and business. We don't have time to be therapists for everyone. I want to say this to the camera. I cannot be my colleague's therapist, my team member's therapist. You know, that's not what the role that we're playing in the workplace, and I just want that to be really clear. What we're doing here is saying, let's learn specific tools and skills in the way that we communicate so that we can get the job done without, I don't know, offending each other, without being on our own agendas, right? Getting the agenda out of the way, communicating in these effective ways to get the job done.
There's no
not
better
just
way to
holding
put cotton
space.
in someone's ears, right?
Say that again?
There's no better way to get someone to stop listening than to hurt or offend or step on toes. And then it's like, whatever business idea you're bringing up next, I'm either going to shoot down or not care about, because I've already I've had an emotional response.
And
right?
care is the big word. People do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you've got to find a way to connect, and that can be something very simple. It doesn't need to be an emotional, deep, I'm holding space for you, open arms, crying conversation. It can just be, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? I know this has been tough for you, and I want to support you. So how can we work together? Just, there are a bunch of tools. We're not going to get into all of them now, because there are just so many different frameworks we can use, but we've got to find a way, in simple ways, to connect to people, be human with them, and then move into what do we need to get the job done.
Agreed. And you're right that there's probably it's actually the premise of the show, that there's too much to talk about that we're going to squeeze into one little moment. But I do want to ask you for some of that, like practical takeaways, some of those nuggets where, you're an expert, you're someone people turn to. And what are some of the things that you hit on with people or talk about, or they're kind of big takeaways? Yeah,
so the expertise that I have, and I always say the word expert is so funny, because I'm still always growing, and I don't see myself as this know-it-all person, but I do have a lot of experience with compassion and with confidence. Yeah. And those two things are super linked. A lot of people find in the workplace they don't have confidence, or they feel unsure, uneasy about delivering feedback, for instance, and honest feedback is the bedrock of a healthy work environment. And also, though, not lobbing that feedback at someone, but being able to be with them around it in a forwarding way. And so I feel like you've got to have compassion for yourself and for other people. That's like the secret sauce of confidence. When you know you're not doing it, and when you really aren't doing it to like CYA or to make someone else wrong, or whatever that conversation is for you, or just to look like you know more than you do because you need to protect your image. When you're out of that, that's the self-mastery and self-awareness piece, and you're off of your triggers and your story. Well, I come from this identity, and so when they said that meant that. That's a lot. That's a lot. You're putting on someone else to hold for you. You're putting your safety in their hands. So when you can get off of those kinds of things and instead focus on understanding that you do care about the person, and also you're not shaming yourself for how you feel, you can then really be confident to communicate things in an effective way. You can know that feedback is just information. It's just information. It's not negative or positive.
It might not even be accurate. It's that guy's information.
And it might not even be accurate, right? And so you don't need to, the feedback doesn't have to land.
That's right.
But you also don't need to tell your boss, well, I don't really understand, I don't get it, and that's not the case. It doesn't need to be so charged, right? So feedback is one of the most important things, and kind of getting off of your own agenda in order to deliver that in an honest way is helpful.
Can you cultivate these things? So when you talk about compassion's importance and giving and receiving feedback's importance, can one improve upon those?
100%. I think I always say compassionate leaders aren't necessarily born, they're developed. And so these are all skills that we can develop. I think the important thing is to understand, so sometimes when people are really hard on their colleagues or their team members or really judgmental about their bosses, they're just as hard on themselves.
Yep.
Right? I mean, you went like this and I'm doing the same thing.
For anyone that's just doing the audio, as soon as she started that sentence, it started pointing at itself. Yeah.
And so he's pointing at himself. Yeah, and I can relate. So you're my kind of person, but I can relate to that, is we're hard on ourselves. And so you're only going to be able to meet someone insofar as you've met yourself. And so if you recognize that, you can be more compassionate with yourself and still get the job done and encourage yourself. So when you give feedback, you're not just talking about what's wrong. You're also being really mindful to think about, well, what does this person bring to the table? Everyone brings something. And if we can combine those things, which requires that we do that for ourselves too.
Yeah.
When we mess up, well, what have we learned? Well, what did we do well before? What will we do well next time? Like in this compassionate way, we can begin to cultivate that in ourselves, and then by default, it becomes easier to do that with your team. It becomes easier to give both the encouragement and the opportunities for improvement. And feedback is a gift. I always say it. Even when somebody tells you something may not land for you, listen, it's uncomfortable sometimes to deliver feedback. So when someone cares enough to give you feedback, sometimes even if it doesn't land for me, I say thank you. Because it's not doesn't land. I'm not triggered.
Yeah.
It didn't land.
And I think, like you're saying, what that feedback can be is, at the very least, you, the listener, understanding at that other person's station in life, when we encountered this moment or series of moments or season together, they had something they wanted me to be aware of, whether it's, in my opinion, completely accurate and very difficult to hear, or in my opinion, inaccurate. There's probably something in there that's worth, like you said, if you're the self-refining type,
Absolutely.
Looking at it, find it, tease it out, figure it out, emotionlessly audit it in, and do something with that.
Yeah. Take the grain that is of value for you and leave the rest. Powerful stuff.
That's all the time we have for you this week on part 1 of what will be our 2-part talk with Magalie René. Join us next week for part 2. Join us every week. And until next week, make this the best week yet.